I'd like to open just by acknowledging the traditional owners, custodians of the land, the Ngunnawal people in which we're meeting today. Wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and their contribution they make to this life, city and region. And I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today's event. So this afternoon, Food Agility and partners will present on the development of the AATP, or the Australian Agricultural Traceability Protocol, produced as a part of the Data-Enabled Traceability Grant, or AgTrace, as it's branded and referred to. Some of you may have attended this morning's showcase, which was centred around the EU or European Union deforestation regulation pilot, which is a real-world application of the AATP in practice. This showcase will be a bit more technical and explain how the AATP was developed and how it can help essentially increase efficiencies in data sharing across the supply chain and aspects of that. We have a lot of people on the line from various government agencies working on related technology initiatives, and hope today what's presented today will provide opportunities for further connection and collaboration. And essentially, just at a high level, the AATP, from our perspective in DAF, it aims to empower producers to verify their data and then also, importantly, control who it's shared with, no matter what the tech platform they or their customers might use. It allows a product passport to be created with the product claims and key traceability events discoverable by supply chain participants that might be downstream if they have permission to see it. And then finally, it was designed to align with international standards and be scalable across commodity and product claim. The focus obviously being sustainability credentials within this project. I'll just now hand over to David Lamb from Food Agility to kick us off. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Tom. I'll just get you to advance that, Ollie. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I'm from the Food Agility Cooperative Research Centre, and it's a privilege to be working with an extensive array of industry partners in delivering the initiative. Throughout the presentation, we would welcome questions and insights from you. It's all part of our learning process as well. So please, if you'd like just to take a moment to scan this QR code, we are running Q&A functionality through Slido. This code will reappear at numerous other locations throughout the sequence of slides. So if you don't have it now, that's okay. Very shortly it'll pop up and it'll keep doing so throughout. So please contribute, because your input, your questions are very valuable to us, and we can all learn together. Look, there's no question that the digital future state of transactions and how we render ourselves and move ourselves through our global village is underpinned by digital wallets and product passports. There are clear trends in the appetite that is growing month by month on moving towards digital interactions, not only just tapping cards, for example, but now actually using devices, hardware-based devices, full stop. And at the end of the day, mobile wallets are in our communities here and now. They're amongst our consumer bases, covering pretty well all ages, and noting that the minimum uptake is at that post-65-year-old bracket. But at the end of the day, that's all moving through, and there's about a 25% uptick year on year in terms of the adoption of this kind of technology. So, you know, it's not a massive leap of thinking to accept the fact that digital wallets, product passports, are coming to a commodity near us. And what's really important is the right guardrails and guidelines are in place. What we're talking about here today, of course, is a component of the broader AgTrace initiative that Tom Townsend referred to earlier. AgTrace is part of a constantly evolving, much larger body of work, and in the context of guardrails and guidelines, really range of other parallel initiatives that we're touching base with, and vice versa, including the Data Standards Working Group, and you'll be hearing from Darren Swindell shortly. As co-chair, we have the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework Data Ecosystem Working Groups. We've got the Department of Finance Verifiable Credentials Working Group, and for example, the IBM Digital Credentials team. We've got enormous array of co-aligned initiatives in place, and we are part of that. AgTrace is an initiative. We're getting a lot of interest from industry in what we're doing. Clearly, commodities and the growth, the progressive growth of market-based rules that need to be underpinned by these sort of enabling technologies is seeing a significant demand, a significant need. Even our initiative itself, you know, we're getting a lot of demand for workshops, webinars, we're getting inquiries. We have a very comprehensive communications plan that we've established to support our work. And even the website, which I commend you all to, if you have any questions or you'd like to learn more, agtraceoz.com.au. We've got more than 250 people registered via website, mailing list, and from over 100 organisations. There is a strong interest among systems operators wanting to understand compliance requirements in this sort of future state. And for example, with imperatives like the Scope 3 financial disclosure processes that are now looming clear and present today, that's an example of the drivers of the interest. So at the end of the day, AgTrace involves a range of proofs of concepts around the art of the possible when it comes to digital and data-enabled traceability systems, facilitating market access. But what's the focus of today's discussion is around the foundational work in establishing the Australian Agricultural Traceability Protocol, the AATP. It's not a protocol, sorry, it's not a system, it is a protocol. It's aimed to have utility value, any criteria, any commodity, any export market, any software platform, aiming for supporting low cost, high integrity, national, international scalability, and of course in decentralised systems, but also amenable to centralised data systems as well. So today we're going to learn about the AATP, why we need it, what it is, how it works, find out how it ties in with existing work being done in Australian ag, and hear from exemplary software solution providers and producers about why they think AATP is important in assisting them with their compliance requirements, both current and emerging. And as I mentioned earlier, we welcome your Q&A and interactions because you are a valuable part of this learning journey. So with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Darren Swindell from the Data Standards Working Group.
Thanks, Dave. So, you know, speaking from the data standards side of things and from the T side, we participated in the AgTrace pilot and trial. Obviously, there are gaps in the traceability at the moment, so interoperability is key to us dealing with the challenges we have right in front of us at the moment, and also taking advantage of all the opportunities we know exist going forward. So the blurry map on the right-hand side is that I'm maintaining is that's a map of the red meat supply chain and all the data that sort of exists around it. That's all connected the way it could be, and probably should be if we had the ability to have interoperability and standards to allow those connections to happen. And the issues are someone around here really needs to get some information from back there, but they're not parties to the same transaction, they don't even know each other exists. So it's really important to the industry to look at interoperability as a solution to these issues. There's an explosion of agtech. I think everyone knows that. There's been a rapid shift of paper going to digital. But there's also new devices, new equipment, new sources of data out there, generated data, often in proprietary silos. And again, that's where interoperability can come in to solve the connectivity issue. And it's been recognised that the key data elements are the sensible sort of starting point to sort of connect those sources together. So there's a real need to have common data standards and protocols. Historically, there's been some limited guidance on data standards and collection, but there is sometimes very specific data standards within industries or silos. But in terms of going across those groups, there hasn't been a lot in the past. There's a lot to look to in other sources, which I know is going to be covered later. Inconsistencies in labelling and coding and ways to connect information together, it's been a challenge. And even differences in data standards across state and federal governments in ag can be a significant issue. So there was a recommendation to establish a governance structure with subject matter experts who can assess and manage standards, as the AATP is planning to do in the 3. There's rapidly increasing demand for more and more data, so the problem just gets bigger, but also the opportunity is increasing over time. Regulators, customers, everyone wants more information, and they no longer just want a tick. They want actual backing evidence and source information to be able to trace where did that information come from. Some inefficiencies in the idea of data exchanges have become more pronounced. And we go back to the challenge of not identifies all ways to link together. So there needs to be a priority put to having standards and identifiers to help get that started. To address the challenge, there's been a data standards working group created to explore the issues. There's been a proposal to create a data interoperability framework for structure and governance, and recommendations around how to implement that, including funding and so on. And I will pass it over to Harley now.
Hey everyone, my name's Harley Thomas and I'm the CTO of Trust Provenance, and I'll just be speaking about the AATP and why we need it. So at critical points in the supply chain, you're really at the intersection of many different commodities, geographic regions, rules, regulations, and requirements. And as we all know, there's an increasing demand on trusted data for different parties to make their relevant claims. If you go a walk down your supermarket aisle, there's thousands of different products from domestic agriculture, international agriculture, imports, pots, pans, batteries, cans of tuna, and it's incredible the complexity behind it as well. Similarly, if you look at the other lens, if you look at our exports to our different trading partners as well, equal number of different products and emerging requirements to access those markets as well. Supply chains are very complex, often fragmented, dynamic and changing as well. As goods move down the supply chain, there's an increase of demand for trusted data back up the supply chain as well. The customer in the supermarket aisle, the retailer, the exporter, the importer often don't have any connection or relationship with the 2, 3 or 4 tiers up the supply chain of where they need that data from to support some of those ESG credentials listed on that left-hand side as well. So we need a solution to address this problem. The naive one could be, why don't we all just push data to one another? That grows exponentially. If we had 5 systems in a supply chain that wanted to share data, we now need 10 connections. 10 systems, you need 45 connections. 100 systems, you need a whopping 4,950 connections. And connections aren't cheap, cost effective, or timely either as well. The other solution might be, why don't we just use a single platform? Everyone in these complex fragmented supply chains, why don't we just push all of our data to one centralized platform as well? But there's a couple of real-life examples in different industries and sectors that we could look to for why that might not be a good solution. If you look at banking and finance, if you go to your local supermarket, you don't need to use the same bank as them. If you go on an international holiday, you don't need to use the same bank as the hotel that you stay at. If you buy a t-shirt on Amazon, you don't need to use the same bank as Amazon.com or that retailer as well. All banks in finance follow a protocol and we can all transact seamlessly with one another. Another good example of this is the internet. Back in the 1980s, there was America Online, and they tried to create what we call like a walled garden on the internet. If you wanted to use news, you had to use their news website. If you wanted to use some kind of email client, you had to use theirs as well. Fast forward today, AOL just simply doesn't exist because centralization stifled growth and innovation. As users of the internet, we will kind of crave decentralization and options to use different providers to meet our needs as well. On the internet, just a little side note, so data is linked by a protocol and discoverable. So we have the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, and they give guidance on a set of protocols for how the internet operates. So if I'm on wikipedia.com looking at the AFL, I could click on a link to go to afl.com to look at the fixtures for the upcoming week. I could also click on another link which takes me to adelaidecrows.com, and Adelaide Crows might have a link to their YouTube channel on youtube.com. All of these different websites might operate in different jurisdictions around the world, different databases and different servers all around the world, operated by different organizations, but because they all follow the same protocol, as a user of the internet, you can follow links and the data that you need is discoverable for whatever your use case is. So can we link traceability and sustainability data in the exact same way that we've done so in finance and the internet as well? Is there an opportunity to link thousands of independent systems to meet our emerging use cases and needs? To do that, just like the internet, we need some kind of way of discovering traceability data. So let's just say you're somewhere in the supply chain. It could be any supply chain at any point within that supply chain, and you have a thing. That thing could be cattle, apple, tuna, barley, or anything else like that. That thing typically has some form of an identifier. If it's cattle, it's got an ear tag with the NLS ID. If it's some kind of horticulture product, it's got a GS1 QR code on it. If it's a car, it's even got a vehicle identification number. So I've got a thing, and I've got the identifier of the thing, but I want more information about that thing. I know who owns the identifier that I'm looking at as well, so I can go to that identifier operator and ask for more information. If it's that cattle, I could go to MLA, IAC perhaps in some future state and say, I have this NLS ID, what site can I go to find more information? And similarly again for port as well with GS1 or perhaps for Grains Australia. And they could direct me to any solution provider that is following this protocol. Not one centralized system, but one of many. And with that, I get a digital product passport for that particular thing that I'm interested in. That passport gives me 2 key bits of information. It gives me traceability data, could be feed-in events, harvest events for grain as well. And it also gives me sustainability credentials about that thing. So now I've got the thing, identifier of the thing, and the digital product passport for that thing as well. And this is just a process that can just repeat infinitely as well. I might have packaged red meat that's about to be exported. I can get the digital product passport for that. That digital product passport might have references to NLS IDs in the processing event at the meat processor as well. I can get the digital livestock passport for that cattle, and I can perhaps go all the way up to the chemical that was used to treat the grain and the grain that was used to feed the cattle as well. So this protocol is the Australian Agricultural Traceability Protocol. It's an extension of the United Nations Transparency Protocol as well. As an extension of the UNTP, that means it facilitates cross-border trade and international interoperability as well. The key takeaway being that this is a protocol, not a platform. Today we already have hundreds of great solution providers that already exist on farm and different parts within the supply chain as well. The adoption of a protocol like the AATP means that we can complement existing solution providers and have data that's discoverable where it already exists in that supply chain. There's a myriad of benefits of the AATP for the industry, which we'll get into more throughout the rest of the session as well. The key takeaways being decentralized and interoperable. Anyone can publish discoverable data and find discoverable data if it's permissioned correctly, complement existing solution providers. It's scalable across a multitude of different credentials, not just commodity specific as well. Users keep their data on their platform of choice, choosing what to share, when to share it, and who they share it with. And most importantly, data is trusted. Credentials that are being discovered are issued by trusted third parties that can be verified as well. So I'll hand over to Steve Capel.
Thank you. Which button is it? Top one? Next. Everyone's crack on time. I better do the same, right? So I'm going to hold your attention for a little while to talk about how to take the AATP as beyond a few pilots and what it would take to make it a ubiquitous national framework with millions of transactions, hundreds of passports and systems, all implementing it, and traceability and transparency information flowing freely. What are the barriers to that? How would we actually do it? That's what I'm here to talk about. So just a quick reminder of, this is basically a summary of Harley's points, that there are different ways to exchange data. And we make the case that only one of them is really commercially and technically scalable. Paper, Okay, we can do that, we do that today, but to do that at scale would be expensive and cumbersome and error-prone. Centralized platforms, hardly spoken about that. Monopolies don't work. They might be cheaper in terms of scalability, but they're a monopoly and nobody will buy it. Interconnected platforms, okay, they solve the monopoly problem, but they don't scale technically. Too many interconnections. So there's really only one way, we would argue, to roll out a data exchange or interoperability framework at genuinely a national or international scale. And that is one that allows freedom of choice of platforms and one that scales technically linearly. So the costs scale linearly. And we'll talk about that. So let's look at the cost side. And this slide is just doing a bit of what-ifing and back-of-envelope budgeting, really. What would this cost at economy level if everyone has implemented AATP and is exchanging data? So I've just based this on basically the ATO and ABS data that says there's roughly 2 million businesses in Australia, of which 5% roughly are agri-businesses, and they're broken down into small, medium, and large. And I've done that because the implementation challenge is different for each of those. So you can see there, roughly 100,000 small businesses. Now, most of those, when this is working, will not know it's working. They won't know what AATP is, and they shouldn't need to, just as you don't need to know how SWIFT works to pay a foreigner. Right? So the way this will work for the vast majority of small businesses is that their on-farm software systems, like AgriWeb or others, will just implement support for the protocol and roll it out in their next release. Whether they charge for that extra feature or not is entirely up to them, and I've assumed for the moment that there'll be a 10% license fee uplift based on an average medium-sized farm, $500 a year, $50 uplift, multiplied by 100,000 farms. There's an economy-wide number. And interestingly, when you get to the smaller number of medium-sized businesses, now the landscape still uses COP systems, but it's a little more complex and a little bit more customized. And you can't just switch it on and use it. You've probably got to do some testing. It's a little bit of a project. Assume the $50,000 project. And for the large businesses, well, it's a project. Right? It's an IT department job. But for each of those categories, it's roughly 100 million-ish economy-wide to roll this out. So the next question is, well, that sounds like a lot. Is it worth it? So here we got some coming at it from the benefit side and looking at the Australian economy size, again, roughly 2.5 trillion, and again allocating 5% of that to agribusiness. And that's a GDP number, so it doesn't represent every individual transaction, which is much higher, but it represents the end value. So what we've done here is taken a whole bunch of benefit categories that have been assessed actually as part of the UNTP project and looked at, I won't go into all of them, but if you're interested, on the AATP website, there'll be a link shortly, it is more details of all these categories and the UNTP website as well. And they're broadly broken into, things that make a buck, that's the first 3, and things that save a buck, that's the next 3, and things that make you worth more, that's the last 2. Right? And for all of those categories, there are all kinds of papers all over the world about the potential benefits, some of them possibly a bit optimistic. So I put consultants say this sort of value as a multiplier. And in UNTP, we wound it down to 1%, and I've gone even more conservative here. So this is a kind of a what-if, right? It needs evidence from the real world to make it true, but it's a fairly conservative estimate. And if you multiply those percentages by the size of the Australian agribusiness and add them all up, your back of envelope comes in at around 5 billion. So this is saying spend a few hundred million and make 5 billion. Sounds like a reasonable business case. And so there's an incentive to go forward. Now, the rest of this is, okay, if there's a rationale to do it, what does it actually take? Technically, governance, all the mechanisms you need to make this work. Well, the first thing is, fairly unsurprisingly, is that there needs to be a really, really well-defined standard. Right? Because remember, this is a decentralized architecture where hundreds or thousands of discrete and individual and independent systems implement the protocol. And you've got to make the protocol pretty specific and rigorous, otherwise 2 businesses will be using tools to build 2 halves of a shed and they won't connect. So it needs to be quite a specific and testable protocol. And it needs to be trusted, which means it needs participation and open governance. It needs to be freely available, unencumbered by license fees and stuff like that. well-managed versions. So what I've drawn there is a governance architecture, which is really a photocopy of what the existing data interoperability governance group looks like. And the message here is, we should be able to just plug AATP into that. Why not? Right? And attract more and more industry peak bodies and industry members to feel a sense of ownership and collaboration around this. This separation of the, if you like, the public good of the standard from any commercial implementation is really important to develop trust to implement this. So that's the first step, and we've gone quite some way there, and a few little things to do. Next thing is, we can't be running grant-funded or any other kind of expensive funded projects for every one of these implementations, right? We've got to learn over time to get faster and faster and cheaper and cheaper and better at implementing. And that needs a whole bunch of documentation and tools and services. So the first thing is the Australian Agriculture Traceability website, aatp.foodagility.com. You can go and look at it. And the next slide gives you just a bit of an overview. I've just picked one page there called the Digital Livestock Passport page. What you can see there is a little bit of a technical diagram that says a digital livestock passport in the Australian context is just an international digital product passport, except we add bovine characteristics and health treatments. And we take away circularity scorecard and materials provenance, because the cells are all grown in one cow on a farm. Right? So some of these things don't matter so much. If you look on the left, you see a bunch of headings. And basically, what a message I want to pass here is that it's a pretty complete website. Gives you the overall governance, how does it work, FAQs, then the business case stuff that I just spoke about, and a whole bunch of case studies of work already done with AATP. Then the specification bit, which are basically all profiles of the UNTP. Then the guidance bit, and then a register. I'll come to guidance in a minute. And the register is basically a place where software vendors, commercial operators can express their intent to implement, and then declare their successful tested implementation, so that we all know who's implemented and who we can trade with. So another part of the website, and these are just a bunch of screenshots, is, well, what are the implementation steps? What have I got to do? Right? And so there's a 5-step process there that takes you from discovery and business case through to at-scale implementation and realizing benefits. And they link to an industry-specific page. Right? So have a look at the business implementation steps there. Yes, I get that. Now, yes, but what exactly have I got to do as a feedlot, say, in the livestock value chain? Where you look at the value chain diagram and look down, and you see I've got to issue an updated livestock passport and a feeding event. Or if I'm a processor, it's a product passport and a processing event. So all that information is on the website, and it's basically a tool to navigate each role through the specific specifications that apply to them. But that's still not enough, right? Because an implementer has to be able to test, and usually wants some examples, working examples, right? So that QR code there is not a Slido. It's and you'll get these slides afterwards, right? But that's a link to an actual digital livestock passport that is both human readable and machine readable, and issued as a verifiable credential. But what we've got here is a test playground where you can look at samples, but you can also create your own and drop your own into that box, and what will pop up is a whole bunch of tips that will tell you, you got that right, you got this wrong, fix that. So basically a self-service architecture to minimize the cost of implementation. Am I going?
Yes.
The other thing is, well, even that, somebody might hit a blockage and want some help. 3 kinds of help. Community support, so an open Slack channel where anybody can ask anybody, hey, I had this problem, can you help me? A formal help desk for registered implementers. And at the top end, consulting services for the big end of town. If they want some help, there are consultants around to help you with that. So, so we've done pretty much everything we can do to make this, there's also a bunch of free open source tooling, by the way, everything we can do to make this cheap, easy, and to implement and test has been done. But we have some dependencies. So what I want to talk about here is these dependencies. Remember a key part of this architecture is that if you've got a thing, an idea of a thing, you can get data about a thing. And these identifiers are existing well-known identifiers, not new ones, right? So they're the NLS ID of the cow, or they're the PIC of the farm, or they're the ABN of the business. right? Or they're the GS1 global trade identification number of the supermarket product. These are all existing, well-established identifiers, and these are the things that are ubiquitous, available, and everyone can find them. The challenge is, got the identifier, now how do I get the passport? Right? That needs the registry operator, so the PIC, the state governments, or the ATO, or GS1, or NLIS, Integrity Systems, to do a couple of little tweaks to make their identifiers resolvable, so that I can say, hey GS1, I've got this GTIN, where do I look for more data? And also to issue identity anchors that say, yes, you really are a genuine holder of this identifier, especially important for things like ABNs. So you can see there that GS1 is already, not surprisingly, they're a global entity, ahead of the game. We're pretty much ready to go with all this. NLIS has moved over the last year, I would say, from what is this to, this is a good idea. We're pretty much committed to it. But we have almost no engagement with the state authorities and with the tax office around these other two important identifiers. And you can see there on the right a list of PIC codes. There are 7 states. And each PIC should ideally be discoverable, resolvable, and verifiable. And out of the 7 states and 3 conditions, that's 21, only 2 yeses, which are discoverable. That's a long way to go on PICs. Lastly, just a word about, we said the nice thing about a standard is that you can have any software product, but then it does beg the question, what about, why that standard? There's more than one standard, right? Which one do I pick? And so this is to provide, I guess, an argument about why AATP is the right way to go. It's based on an international standard, which itself is based on some very well-established frameworks from ISO, GS1. It's aligned with we're working closely, the UN is working closely with the European Commission for alignment with the European Digital Product Passport. So a lot of hard work gone into a global standard, which we can just pick up and use, right? And it's actually only a 20% maybe extra piece of work, so all the heavy lifting done, and the heavy lifting maintained in terms of ongoing alignment, and we just use it to make our Australian agriculture traceability protocol. And we're not alone, right? There are several other big commitments, some of them quite huge, like the one at the bottom there. The Responsible Business Alliance is a member organisation of all the household names and technology providers. But by building on this, we also not only get a lot of heavy lifting done, but we also empower ourselves or get ourselves ready for cross-industry interoperability. Right? So maybe one day in the future, Mercedes wants to know the carbon intensity of the leather on their seats, can find, trace the way all the way back to an Australian farm that grew the cow, even without the farmer knowing, as long as it's public data the farmer's willing to share. So the message here is UNTP is a safe bet, because it's getting a lot of global traction, and therefore AATP is as well. This slide, it's my last slide, comes from, not from AATP or UNTP actually, it's created by the Surpass Consortium, which is a European Commission funded project, and it's highlighting the potential benefits and the synergies between national domestically regulated passports, like the European Digital Product Passport, which applies at the point of market entry, usually for finished goods, and imposes due diligence obligations on that market operator to be confident that the claims they're making are valid. How do they do that if most of their products are coming from overseas? The answer is, what the UN is trying to do together with the EU is position the UNTP as a global upstream protocol that can help provide that due diligence and confidence for market entry products. Whether those market entry products are in Europe or elsewhere doesn't matter, but this is the synergy between the two. And several border authorities around the world are talking about green passports basically as border control items, so they're multi-use. So that's it from me. Was I on time?
You were. Brilliant. You killed it.
Right. Thank you.
Hi everyone. The Australian Farm Institute and McCabe Consulting have worked on the benefit cost analysis for Proof of Concept 2. I'm Katie McRobert, the Executive Director of AFI. I'm going to take you through some of the broader context within which this program of work is happening, and then I'm going to hand over to Kate McCabe, who's going to show you through the economic analysis. So what are the drivers behind this work? Some of the many things keeping Australian farmers awake at night include the impacts of climate change on agricultural production, resulting in productivity and profitability challenges, social issues, including workforce availability, resource competition in a low carbon economy, and concerns regarding production practice, all coming at a time when productivity is a key focus for the industry, and economic resilience measures and governance drivers, including mandatory requirements for reporting on climate-related financial disclosures. To track the impacts of these issues and to provide evidence of corporate responsibility, traceability is key. Australian agriculture is, of course, heavily focused on export, but export focused means trade exposed. Demonstration not only of compliance, but also of proactive sustainability efforts is key to maintaining access to markets. This is particularly important given that we export more than 70% of the value of produce across a range of commodities. That is, we specialise in premium quality ag products, and this necessitates a high level of scrutiny on claims of provenance and responsible production. We're not yet ready to meet markets' expectations. Access to those markets now and in the future requires the ability to defensively report against ESG regulations and meet those sustainability expectations. AFI's interactions with leading agribusinesses for a recent project on the links between ESG reporting and traceability highlighted unexpected variance in maturity for reporting requirements. Readiness ranged from advanced, from organisations which have well-established processes for collecting and communicating information, through to beginner businesses, sometimes quite large ones, which had no systems in place and no plans to incorporate them. Australian ag value chain actors can see that traceability has potential value. They want to see the actual value. A robust traceability system applied across the ag sector can help to fairly distribute the value and potential premium from sustainable practices across the entire chain. As one stakeholder put it, traceability is the key to the castle. Securing our ESG metrics and sharing knowledge can pass value all the way through the line. Our trading partners need to see the evidence of these claims. The Australian Ag Sustainability Framework is just a start towards communicating what we value in ag systems, including the safety and quality of our outputs alongside fair treatment within the industry and good stewardship of natural resources. But the first question an international stakeholder asks in response to seeing this framework is, how can you prove it? A system which enables transmission of trusted information on these principles is imperative, and this project aims to provide a demonstration of value both to participants at the producer end and to end users or regulators, buyers, consumers or traders. Some of the benefits of traceability are quite apparent. Current industry needs, including biosecurity, market access, efficiency, fraud risk management, pricing accuracy. This benefit cost analysis focuses specifically on those AATP particular benefits, which include reduced regulatory burden and integration costs, improved supply chain due diligence, along with data security and ownership, and really importantly, scalability, which is demonstrated through the proof of concept results. This is a key differentiator of applying a decentralised protocol. I also want to highlight some of the differences between proof of concept 1 versus proof of concept 2. POC1 participants included multiple organisations across the red meat supply chain. And while an even larger number of participants would have helped to validate the assumptions we made in POC1, the richness of the information provided from producer through feedlot through to processors and including some other relevant stakeholders enabled a triangulation of data. POC1 participants were also facing a burning platform, which was the assumed imminent implementation of the EUDR, or European Deforestation Regulation, and thus they were incentivised to contribute to the project. In POC2, the technology stack used to design the AATP and used in POC1 was quite different to the tech stacks primarily used by participating solution providers, and documentation requires multiple examples across different use cases and the technical capabilities to demonstrate implementation approaches. These gaps in knowledge cause some challenges. And also with no burning platform, there was limited participation from HORT users in POC2, which meant the information for input into BCA models was also limited. In short, POC1 had more data points. Now, thinking about the business case of the AATP, of those 6 business case outcomes, market access, data-driven decisions, risk mitigation, premium pricing, efficiency, and consumer trust, several were not apparent for the POC2 BCA case study. For example, premium pricing and consumer trust for cherry production were really difficult to quantify. This doesn't mean that those other benefits don't apply to horticulture. Rather, the information that we needed to quantify these benefits in an economic model was just not there. As such, the BCA for POC2 focuses primarily on efficiency and on market access benefits. Now I'll hand over to Kate to take you through the BCA.
Thank you, Katie. Let's start with the basics, benefit cost analysis. You're likely to be familiar with the term, but put simply, it's a systematic way to evaluate a proposal or initiative. It looks at the impacts with gains and losses over time converted into present value terms. The BCA process for AgTrace is summarised here. We look at a base case and options relating to the proposed initiative. So in the proof of concepts, we've looked at a current state and then what the future state would look like with AATP applied, and then monetise the impacts where possible. So let's look at our two proof of concepts for beef and cherries and what we found at the producer level in relation to costs. Implementation costs cover things like setting up digital solutions, creating digital product passports, hardware costs, training. Ongoing costs include the subscriptions, maintaining digital passports, and managing verified credentials throughout the supply chain. So to give you some numbers, for a beef producer, initial implementation was about $640, with ongoing costs around $600 per year. Regulatory burden was reduced by $200 annually by replacing paper-based processes with more efficient digital processes. For cherry producers, initial implementation was higher, about $2,000, with ongoing costs of $6,000 per year. There are costs specific to the POC2 use case, including sensor hardware and related technology expenses, which contribute to this higher cost. But they also saw significant regulatory burden reductions. A word of caution, it's important to emphasise that we had to rely on many estimates and assumptions in the benefit cost analysis work. It should be noted in testing we were not using live supply chain participants and their existing ERP or farm management systems, but rather mock apps and conceptualising what these changes look like across the supply chain. Now let's dive deeper into POC1, the beef supply chain exporting to the EU requiring EUDR compliance. The supply chain here is quite complex, involving transformation events rather than simple aggregation. For UCAS accreditation, there are approximately 3,400 producers versus only 37 feedlots and 60 processors, which impacts where the costs are borne across the supply chain, with producers higher at around $18 million compared to feedlots and processors at a lower level. A positive net present value of $70 million over the 10 years was estimated, with the most significant of the benefits being the EU price premium retained due to AgTrace initiatives. Focusing back on cherry growers and POC2, given uncertainties which Katie has talked about, the limited data availability, and since we haven't tested the pilot with real supply chain participants, we modelled different price premium scenarios alongside the regulatory burden benefits for growers. Here's what we found on this graph, which shows the present value of benefits in blue and costs in orange, with the difference, the green line, or net present value. For an average cherry grower, a revenue increase of more than 3.2% would be needed to achieve a positive net present value and a benefit cost ratio above 1. If a grower could secure a 10% revenue increase, the net present value over 10 years would be approximately $100,000 for the average grower. This demonstrates the potential value of AgTrace adoption, especially in markets where premium pricing opportunities exist. In POC 2, we modelled the scalability of AATP with 6 ESG or compliance-related credentials. The base cost for implementing AATP and GLN verification over 10 years was about $52,000. Then adding more credentials like orchard verification or organic certification resulted in slight cost increases, as shown by the green line, but also reduced regulatory burdens, as shown in the blue. What's important here is the cost curve. While there's an upfront cost for the first credential, the incremental costs for adding more credentials are minimal. The scalability is a game changer for producers. This makes AATP a huge benefit, especially for a mixed farming operation handling multiple commodities with various sustainability requirements. An example for a mixed farming operation, they might have a sheep enterprise, run some beef, maybe grow some grain. So instead of having to juggle multiple systems or their solution provider passing on the cost of expensive integrations, AATP enables interoperability with existing systems, saving producers time and money while maintaining market access or even unlocking premiums. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now over to Phil Tickle from Semo Labs to give us another working example.
Okay, thanks everyone. Phil Tickle's my name. I'm Managing Director and Co-founder of Semo Labs, and I've been involved with a number of the work that's been underway with the AgTrace over the last 18 months or so. What I'm going to do here today is go through a live example. As Steve and Harley and Darren and others have said here today, the AATP is a protocol, it's not a platform. And what I want to show you here now, I'm going to be Farmer Phil for a few minutes and walk through a live example of an implementation of the AATP. So we're using AATP Connect, which is an AgTrace platform. It's got a bunch of functions in here. So can you step back for a second? We need to have the ability to bring farms on board. So I want to bring my farms on board. I want to have the ability to request credentials of various forms, to manage those credentials, and also need to have the ability to then manage my consignments, create the consignments, and then share that information in terms of compliance down the supply chain. I also want to have choice in terms of the market access. So in this case here, Farmer Phil's a UCAS producer. He wants to ensure that he's got compliance against the UCAS accreditation with the EU deforestation-free beef. But there's a whole range of other market access credentials that are coming in the pipeline, like the science-based targets and many others. So this is just one. So I need to be able to do that. So I'm going to choose here. I need to get compliance around the EUDR. I need to be able to onboard my farm, so using the spatial pick concept in here, linking back to the livestock production assurance and integrity systems company. We verify that I'm an accredited producer. I verify my address. I verify my land parcels, which link back to my land title. That takes a couple of minutes to do that. I then need to request a credential. In this case here, we talked this morning about some detail around the EU deforestation assessments, but here's an example here where I've requested a credential for the property and got a result back. I've now got a deforestation credential, and I now need to add that to my consignments. So we need an application to do that. And again, the AATP, this is an example of the implementation of AATP in terms of managing, in this case here, some cattle consignments that have got real animals and real consignments in play. So once I've actually got my credential, I want to add that to a consignment, but I also need to link to Integrity Systems Company here. So we've got NLIS, which is the foundation of our biosecurity system, the ability to link the credential, in this case here a deforestation credential, to the Integrity Systems Company, and then to the consignment itself. Now, as an individual producer, that's pretty easy if I'm a breeder and going straight to a sale yard or to a processor. But there might be many other transactions in the supply chain. So if I'm selling weaners, I'm selling weaners off to a sale yard. It requires a consignment and the ability to shift that credential from the consignment to the individual animals. The animals get broken up through the sale yard, gets sold to multiple producers. And again, you need to be able to then share the consignments, the vendor declarations, and the fact that those animals have been split up. We now need to have the credentials travelling with the animals. So this whole process is about shifting the credential from the farm to a consignment, and then to be able to trace those individual animals as they get moved around these various supply chains. Once we've done that, Steve's talked about Harley talked about the passport. To create the passport and then put that passport into the consignment to be pushed down the supply chain. From an importer perspective, we've already tested the product passports and the due diligence statements. So we've got the capacity to share that with an importer. In the case of EUDR, there's major fines of non-compliance there, so we've been able to test and verify that. And then the ability to then scan a barcode onto a package of meat. So we've got a verified credential here, and the ability to then for a consumer to get information on that particular product that's on the shelf. But more importantly, and most importantly, then to be able to share those credentials in a permissioned way back up the supply chain, depending on who you are in the supply chain. So as a consumer, you might just need to know that it's got a credential, but if you're part of another supply chain, you want to know more about that, and you'd be permissioned to do so. And just, I suppose, just to finish off here, there's the level of complexity here. It starts off looking quite simple, but in this case here, just to give a quick example of how quickly it gets complex, we've now got just a small number of animals on 3 farms that need to come into the system. Every farm has a different set of credentials. They go to a sale yard. Those animals then get potentially put into mixed mobs in the sale yard. They then go from that sale yard and they've then been sold to multiple people, and we're now in three backgrounding properties. Those 3 backgrounding properties then put them back into feedlots, and before you know it, you need 9 product passports to describe literally a couple of handfuls of animals that have started off as weaners on three properties. So the level of complexity goes up by orders of magnitude, and this is what the AATP is really about solving. Just to finish off, I suppose what we've just lagging here, come on. So what I've done here is I've shown you an implementation of the AATP. Most importantly, this is about industry adoption. So we've developed a reference library, so effectively what you're seeing here is an implementation of some reference code, a reference library of code. That information is available, and the whole idea here is for third-party software providers that are wanting to engage with the supply chains to be able to have access to this reference library. So that's going to be available to people, and that's really about adoption. And so we need to get government organisations as well as various software parties, existing farm management software companies engaged in the process and adopting the AATP as part of their standard business.
Thank you, Phil. I'd like to welcome Alan Hayes from FreshChain, another project partner, to detail another working example of the AATP. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Dan. And hi, everyone. That's the code scan for questions. A bit of background on FreshChain. FreshChain is an Australian solution provider helping solve current and emerging industry challenges and extract opportunities, particularly in the horticultural sector. Our solution is underpinned by end-to-end digital traceability and also blockchain. Our key purposes are to enhance food safety and mitigate risk, streamline cross-border trade, provide provenance and authentication and transparency, credential evidence and assurance, sustainability capture and assessment reporting, and streamlining regulatory compliance obligations, as well as quality and supply chain monitoring. So this project fit in perfectly for our solution. Our role in the POP2 was act as a packhouse management system for a cherry grower in New South Wales, creating identifiers using smart labelling for digitalised credentials to be discovered by stakeholders in the supply chain. These digital product passports can be viewed by anyone with the product, as Harley mentioned before, or by a machine looking for these credential information in a machine-readable format. Don't scan it just yet, but this is the result of all the digital work, is a globally recognised GS1 digital link QR code. So I'll give some background first behind that because it probably makes a lot more sense. We've used the GS1 digital link QR code as the global standard allows the one one code to be read by different parties and return through this resolver a different set of information. So if I'm a consumer and I'm scanning with my phone, it's going to return something that's video rich, has the information I'm looking for, has a way to feedback with the producer. If I'm a system, and using what Harley talked about before, global standards for the internet, say, hey, I'm a computer and I would like it in a machine readable format, and I would return that. Or at a checkout, hopefully by 2027, we'll have retail-ready scannability of this QR code so we can establish the price and sell it through the checkout. So in this POC, we created many conformity credentials, traceability events, and then a final digital product passport. So we've got 3 digital product passports, one for the orchard, which created from a source certain program participation, which is a verification service of chemical types, a DAP orchard accreditation, which is required for export to China, a harvest event of actually harvesting the cherries, which are here today if you're in the room, which then creates the orchard digital product passport, which creates the identifiers, so which bin they came from, the grower details, the orchard, the block, and then finally a unique identifier. We then transfer that event with digital traceability events to the pack house. In the pack house, we have another DAF pack house accreditation for that facility. We have a fresh change LN location verification and quality management conformity credential, which basically just uses our sensor technology to follow the product to ensure that it's maintained at the right temperature and it's at the locations that another verification method for saying where the product was. We did the packing event, the palletisation event, and then produced a pack house digital product passport. Now that pack house digital product passport is the entire consignment of that packing of that orchard fruit. Then we've transferred that to the treatment or freight forwarding facility. So there's the actual treatment event, the loading and packing into a air freight container, the issuing of a phytosanitary certificate, which is a digital conformity credential, and then producing the export digital product passport. And then the final event is the sale event to the overseas buyer in China. That all looks good, but the real detail is when you actually scan it. So if you scan that QR code, you'll be presented with the Fresh Chain platform. Now the Fresh Chain platform, because you're a consumer, you're scanning with your smartphone, you're going to see the video of the grower, giving you a bit of detail. But you'll see in the middle, there's a button that says AATP, AgTrace Digital Product Passport. That then links to all the information that I just talked about before. So basically, the best way to walk through it is to go to the bottom of each passport to the last traceability event, and that will transfer you up the chain to the next digital product passport. Yeah, just to finish, from a Fresh Chain point of view, AATP is definitely, out of every project that we've ever done, has the highest potential of solving many of the issues that we come across with our customers daily.
Thank you, Alan. And if you have the time, you just scan that QR code. We'll just borrow a minute while you do that.
Yeah.
Everyone have a cherry.
Sorry to those not in the room.
There's the label actually produced that you can see there.
Robbie's also put it in the chat as well.
Oh, great. So the QR code is in the chat as well. Thank you very much, Alan. The next segment is going to be an interview conducted by Steve Capel to one of our farmers participants to give you their perspectives on the AATP. I'll let you drive that.
Right. Hello, Cam. Thanks for spending a bit of time today. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your farm and your sustainability practices.
Thanks, Steve, and nice to be chatting. So yes, our farm is at Highlands in north central Victoria. It's about 1,400 acres. It's relatively high above sea level, so it's about 700 metres above sea level. And we get about 900 to 1,000 mils of rainfall a year, sometimes more if it's a really good season. We have a Black Angus self-replacing herd. You can see a picture of one of ours in the background there. So we have about 250 cows, try and breed about 200 calves a year, just spring calvers. And we've been very interested in sort of regen farming and biodiversity and making sure that our farm is better than when we bought it. And so that's something of a particular interest to us.
Yeah, and maybe lower in emissions too. So with all that good practice, so how do you actually, where do you sell your cows?
So our cows, we tend to sell our calves when they're about 10 or 11 months old, most of them. And typically we've just sold them either through the sale yards or through Auctions Plus. So given our size, we don't have a closed loop, if you like. Some of our neighbours do sell direct to abattoirs, and they organise to go through abattoirs to the butchers. But given our size, we're really reliant on just the general market and selling through sale yards.
Right. So here you are doing the right thing with biodiversity and carbon intensity and so on, but not really able to advertise the fact that you're doing the right thing, because by the time your cows are the other side of the sale yard, the relevant information that might differentiate you and perhaps even get you higher prices is kind of lost. Yeah. So the AATP, the Australian Agricultural Traceability Protocol, is designed to be something that sits behind your normal farming software, AgriWeb or whatever tools you use, almost invisible to you, a bit like the way banking system works. You make payments, but you don't know how it works behind the scenes, but links your farm performance to the NLS ID of your cow so that irrespective of where it ends up, people can still find it. Do you think that would add some value to you and your business?
Oh, I think that would be amazing. I think that where we sit today, and we have done some baseline testing of our emissions and have a good feel for where they are and what we need to do to try and improve them. But as you say, when we sell our calves, there's not really any information that goes with them. If it could be linked to the NLIS tags, I think that would be fantastic from a farmer's perspective. So if there was an extra forms and information and things like that had to be filled in and that was part of the process, I think that would be a great result. And yes, we use an agri software service provider. Again, they're quite helpful for farmers now. So I think that would be a great result if we were able to link something in that made it easy for farmers. And at the end of the day, it is going to be very important for both producers and also processors to be able to monitor and report the emissions and the information that goes with it.
Yeah, and now you'll be able to just do that, hopefully with no special extra forms, just using your on-farm software. Well, good. I'm pleased that that seems like we'll be able to deliver some value for you. I appreciate the time you've taken, Cam. It was good talking to you.
Very good. Thanks for the chat, Steve.
Listening to myself.
And thank you, Steve, and thank you, Cam. We're going to move into the wrap-up phase, but again, there's the QR code if you'd like to lodge questions. We've got quite a few coming in, which is great. We have a little bit of time to address them. So please, if you have any questions, jot them down through the Slido functionality, and we'll bring it to the table here. Okay, so in terms of a high-level summary, at the end of the day, governance is critical to putting in place the guardrails and guidelines for this open, decentralised kind of innovation system that we want to see emerging. And so at the end of the day, as I opened with, we've got an impressive array of allied traceability projects in play at the moment, and so it's a real opportunity now to start bringing them all together under a nationally supportive and transparent governance framework, building upon the data standards groups that are already created and already developing their own frameworks and looking for implementation. And all this can feed into making the AATP a trusted standard. standard. And we do have AATP users already out there. Regen is one example. The National Livestock Identification Scheme is a really important enabler because you heard a lot of examples framed up around the red meat sector as examples. And we know there is a significant activity going on in place at the moment around uplifting the NLIS. And so there's an opportunity here to generate the harmony early. And as alluded to by Steve and a number of others throughout the presentations, data assets like the state-based PIC registers are really important. And as Steve alluded to, 2 ticks out of 21, I think from memory, 2 yeses out of 21 opportunities. There's ample opportunity to innovate and develop on the back of this sort of bringing together of assets. The ATO, the Australian Business Register, the Department of Finance, verifiable credential working groups are all really important elements that are currently in play, and we're really excited about the opportunity of coming together at the most appropriate time and forum. And at the end of the day, if various initiatives are working at different time cadences, that's okay because we've got alternatives I think we all could come together and work on and to make up that ground. As I alluded to in my opening comments, AgTrace, the broader initiative, has 3 proof of concepts. You've already heard in some of the demonstrator segments today, the red meat proof of concept, so-called POC1, and of course Alan was emphasising, and as did Kate with the cost-benefit work, the cherries, the horticultural demonstrator we did, the so-called POC2. Of course, what's framing up for next year is our 3rd and final proof of concept with a focus on the grains industry. For us, this is not only going to be another technical proof of concept, as we have alluded to for the first 2, the red meat and the horticulture one, but it's an important opportunity to really bed down and test the robustness of the Australian Agricultural Traceability Protocol, governance framework, and really start working on, through the value indicators, the genuine industry uptake of this opportunity. And by the way, and this is a work in progress, and you'll be hearing more about this into the next year, Proof of Concept 3 will be an opportunity to look at mixed consignments, mixed products, bringing in new approaches to traceability, well not new, but other dimensions that we haven't exercised today, such as mass balance, and book and claim chain of custody models. So we're looking forward to updating you on that in the next year.